Hello and welcome to what I hope is the first of many videos in a series for Design Edge learning, and it should be an interesting journey that takes us down the path of some rabbit holes of other software programs that we use and probably the plasma table operation itself. But hopefully we'll start and keep it limited to mostly the Design Edge software. My name is Robert, and I was a heating and air contractor for 20 years, and after retiring from that, I switched to artwork and metal cutting, sign cutting, powder coating, have added CO2 laser, CNC laser to that, and it's just a fun job. So hopefully wherever you're at in the journey, if you're doing it on the side for a hobby or for your business, some bits and pieces of this video series will be of help. So our main focus is going to be Design Edge and its function and use. And I'm aware that there are many levels that you can purchase in this program, and I think that we will talk about those briefly. And I will do my best in each video to show you the features that will be available to you in basic as well as advanced on the different levels. Hang on. Bear with me. There are things I'm going to get right and there are things I'm going to get wrong. So if you will let me know in the comments, then I will certainly do my best to address those things in future videos. Also, if you have an idea or a question specifically about something in a video or a topic that you'd like to see covered, it's going to be a long process. Design Edge is a powerful software piece. And okay, let's get started. So when you open Design Edge, you are going to see this screen right after you dismiss the welcome screen. There is a way to disable that. You can go to About Design Edge and uncheck the Show Information menu on Startup, and that's what I do. Not interested in seeing that every time. So when you first open Design Edge, the very first time, you're going to see a much different screen than this. All of the table points are going to be actual grade points, so they're going to be in a pattern. And of course, this table itself is going to be the shape of your table. So if you have a 4x4 table, it's going to be a square, and if it is the Go Torch 2x2, you're going to see a smaller square. This is for the Samson 510 that I have. So this is going to represent your table. And let's go up here and look at settings and levels, and you can see what I have purchased and what I have active as is, and we'll talk briefly about that. In your check boxes, as you can see, if you have not purchased it, you have a grayed out box with nothing in it. If you have purchased it, you'll have a check mark. Basic will be a grayed out box with a gray check mark. Advanced will be a white box with a black check mark. If you have purchased something and it's not working, you can go to this screen, the Activate Level screen, and turn it on and off, or cycle through the options. So if I wanted to demonstrate something, which I will here, with basic design, you can see that by clicking here, it cycles through what I have purchased. So I'm going to turn it to basic, and I'm going to leave the rest alone, and I'm going to close. And then when I go to my settings, this is what you will see in the settings window if you have basic design. Advanced adds quite a few options. We'll look at those shortly. Real quick, first thing I do is set my grid to a 1-inch point spacing with 4 snaps per grid. That gives me a 1/4 inch snaps to deal with when I'm using the grid snapping, and I just seem to like it better, and for me it's what works. The link paths, I set the gap to jump to 0. I don't want it to move any paths. If you use the link command and a path endpoint is close to another endpoint, it will jump that gap to link it together, whatever gap you have set here. I personally am designing things accurately, and I don't want anything to move unless I tell it to move. So for me, I set it to 0. There are times when you'll want that different, and we'll talk about that when we cross that bridge. Autosave is defaulted to not checked. I recommend you check it and set this to whatever you'd like. I use 5 minutes. We're going to switch over to the Offset Convert tab, which is going to be important later when we are creating cut paths. Your kerf, we're going to do a whole video on that later. Your lead in, I prefer 2/10. I think it comes with 15.15, just whatever works for you here. And then the gap at the end of the loop is how much it stops the cut path before it runs back on itself, which, you know, the kerf itself is probably 50-60 thousandths, so there's no point in going past, and so it comes preset at 10 thousandths, and that works most of the time. So those are in all the settings I'm going to cover today in the first video, and I'm actually going to go back now and activate the levels and change up to advanced, and then we're going to go back into the settings and see how much more you get. So for me in design, I prefer to show solid paths. That helps me see dropouts and islands in a file. I do prefer to show wide cut paths. When I convert to a cut path, that shows you on the screen the width of your kerf, so you can see what the torch is actually taking out in the material. And we are going to show the table edge. We don't need to hide that. And left over from other settings is the grid. The same with the gap to jump. Advanced adds this delete overlapping segments, which I also set to 0 because I don't want it to change anything. Autosave carries over. You can adjust in advanced the minimum number of undo steps. I don't typically have a problem with those factory settings. Node precision, I leave it 100 most of the time. That has to do with the nodes that make up a 1-inch circle. And so a node is a point, because, you know, in a raster image, when you've just got a picture and you're painting with a paintbrush, a circle is just a circle. But in the mathematical world, it's a series of points, and those points are called nodes. And so if you had a circle with 4 nodes, it would be a square because it jumps from node to node. So you add precision, you add nodes, and that expands out and turns things into arcs. The gap that's treated as an intersection is a teeny tiny number from the factory default, and I have not found a reason to change that. Real quick, for you advanced design users that want to use the dimension tool to draw dimensions on your drawing, if you don't have a font assigned, it will not be an option. So I'm not going to click this. It'll open up all the font window. But if you need to go here first, if your dimension tool is not working, pick a font, and then these settings here is the decimal places to carry it to for linear measurements, for angular measurements, and how tall the text is. Smooth paths, you do have the smoothing tool in basic design, but you cannot customize it. And so you're going to want find arcs during smoothing turned on, and you're going to want to set that precision comes factory at 5. If your computer's taking a long time to process that, you can change this number. Alright, so when you are just starting out, you're going to need to know a little bit about file operations. Obviously, new makes a new one. Save saves your file. You can import, and you can open. So, open is only for PCM, Design Edge files, the PlasmaCAM file extension. You can open PlasmaCAM files, and it will import, or it will bring into the software a file that was previously saved or one that you downloaded. So if you open that piece, then you'll get all of the pieces. The PCM can contain both blue cut paths and then of course purple or white regular paths. So that's going to get them all in one piece. That's open. Now if I open another design edge file, it gets rid of the first one and replaces it. If I wanted to add more to it or do more on this sheet of metal here, then I can import. So now I need to go to Control I or import, and I can import several different kinds of files. I can get picture files, BMP, TIFF, or JPEG. I can import the design edge PlasmaCAM file, or I can import a DXF or a PLT, which is a file that contains vectors already. Or you can actually get a spreadsheet or G-code, which if you don't know what it is, don't worry about it. If you do, if somebody were to send you the G-code, which is actually toolpaths run, then you can import those and potentially cut them or work with them back as vectors. So the STL file import is a 3D file, and I think you're only going to see that option if you have the 3D upgrade, and we're not going to cover that today. So if I want to import another PlasmaCAM file, then I can do that. Let me see, let me just pull in this little alignment flag that I've shared. And so when it comes in, it's already green and selected. And as you can see, it imported right on top of my other piece. So the best way to deal with that is before you click anything, while it's selected, hit M for move, click in a spot and get the thing off the top of your stuff so you can work with it. Okay? You can also, let me get rid of those, you can import, as I said, DXFs, and I work with those a lot. So let's just pull in this cake topper. You're going to have some options. If it is a file that you've downloaded that somebody shared, they may have saved it in something like Inkscape or Corel or some other program that didn't link all the segments together. You can tell it to link them, and if your gap to jump setting is set to 0 like mine, then if it's not a touching segment that should be joined, it won't link it. So it's up to you whether you want to do it in one step or multiple. 99% of the time, this import as cut paths, you do not want to have that checked. The only time you have that checked is if you're actually importing a drawing from maybe another program that made the cut paths, and you need them to come into Design Edge as a cut path ready to go. We'll pull this cake topper in. It's a DXF file. We'll tell it to link the segments. The 3D properties has to do with 3D. The groups, maybe you've ever, somebody else has gotten it to work. I've never found it to do anything for me. But it's possible that if saved in the right version of DXF, if somebody had paths grouped together, they would come in pre-grouped, but I don't ever get that. So, okay, so that is a DXF file. You can see it's already vectors. So that covers that. Let's look real quick at importing a picture. So if we try to pull in a BMP or a JPEG, so we're going to pull in this picture, and I'll show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like when you import a BMP or JPEG or TIFF into Design Edge and you have advanced design. If you do not have advanced design, you're going to go straight to this 256 color picture where you're stuck having to find your background color. White is right here before the grayscales. But in this particular instance, that's not right. It's this red color that is that came in as kind of an orange. Maybe this is it. Nope. So you're going to have to see control. You can see control removes them up here. You would have to figure out what this color is and find it and get it clicked. And when you get it right, it's going to look like it's supposed to. So I can tell Advanced to please to convert it to black and white for me and convert it to vectors. Or if I wanted to manually trace this, I could tell it to show it in the drawing, and then I could just manually draw it and trace the picture. And one quick note, don't worry about the fact that it's all smashed up and the aspect ratio is not right. That's just how this window displays it. So when I tell it to change it to black and white, it's a much easier picture to see. My background color in this case is black, so I'm going to pick black and tell it next, and then it shows me what it's going to look like, never mind the ratio. And I pick here whether it's a solid, this is filled in, or this is an outline drawing. If it was just an open circle and I wanted it to make a filled in circle, I could pick outline and it would fill it in for me. And then click next and it will convert it to vectors for me. And now we have something where we can go in here and select. It pretty much turns your drawing, your picture, into math. And so that shows you how to do it. I'm going to have a much more in-depth section on importing pictures, vectorizing, and even working with pictures in a paint program to get them ready to import. But that's not the focus of our video today. What I do want to cover today before I let you go is snaps. There are several different snaps in Design Edge. I will read through them real quick, and the way you can find them is while your computer is looking for a set of coordinates or a spot, okay, you can actually tell it to snap to a particular point. And you can get that through the hotkeys, or you can get it by pressing down the center mouse button or pushing down on your scroll wheel, and you'll see there the list of snaps. So we have center, quadrant, tangent, intersection, midpoint, endpoint, arc end, on path, and perpendicular are all of the ones dealing with shapes. And then to do with the torch, if I were connected to my table out there, we would have a torch point snap where we could snap to the crosshairs of the torch wherever it's located on the table. A table edge snap, we can snap to the edge. It'll just grab the edge wherever we click closest to. A spot snap, anytime you generate a red dot in Design Edge by using the measurement tool or the detect intersections tool, you can snap to that spot. So we most commonly use that in when we've used the measure tool to find the center of mass of something. And then we have 3 snaps at the bottom. These can be locked on. These hotkeys are temporaries, but if you use Home, Insert, and Delete, or go up to the settings choice up here, you can actually put a check mark and lock these on or off. So they all have a place. But let's go through the list and let's just look first at center snap. So what I did is I just drew a line, and let's say I wanted to snap that line to the center of this circle. Well, I would push C for center snap, and so you can see I've done that, and that's turned on, or I would pick it from the menu, and then I would put it in the center of this circle. But that's not done by just clicking as close as you can to the center. Snaps like on the path, intersection, node point, and midpoint all have to be clicked on the path that you're trying to find the location of. So if I want the center of this circle, I have to click on the circle itself, not out here in the middle. So if I click there, you see it jumps that line point to the center. Same situation, if I wanted to come down here and snap to the center, I would push C center and click on the edge of the circle, and it would pop in there. Okay, so the next snap we have on the list to talk about is a quadrant snap. So each circle has 4 quadrants. You've got 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock quadrants. So again, to find a quadrant, you have to click on the path of the circle, and it will snap to the closest quadrant to where you click. So if I click here, slightly past what I would assume is the midpoint of this quadrant, then I'm going to snap up there to 9 o'clock. So you see it jumped up to 9. And then if I do a Q quadrant snap again, if I wanted to draw across the diameter of this circle, then I would just click here. I could click pretty much from here all the way down to about here, and it's going to go to this quadrant here. Once I pass this point, it should jump down here. So you can see I can click it right up there. No problem. The next one we have is a tangent snap, and I'm going to go ahead and stop drawing my line for that. So let's say, get this out of the way, let's say that I want to draw a line from the corner of this square to come up here and intersect with this circle wherever it would be if I'm going to do a little demo. The tangent of a circle is that line that passes it but without touching. And so design edge does allow it to touch because that's what we have to have. So instead of drawing this and then having to guess in here about where it needed to be, what I would do is I would say line from the N node point. We're going to kind of grab one of these standard snaps. And remember, the node points are the points that make up a drawing. So there are 100 nodes in a 1-inch circle, but in a square there are only 4 at each corner. So we're going to put N node point snap, and if I click on the square close to the corner, it jumps to the corner. And then I will push or select T for tangent snap, and I'll select this circle and see what happened. So it jumped up there. I right click, I hit L for line, N for node point. I'll just click on the square, it's going to jump to that, and I can get the T tangent snap, and I'll come down here just to demonstrate. You see it jumps out to that spot where it all fits, and then you can X trim that out, and if I join it, you can see that it is the tangent. You can come from the tangent of one circle to the tangent of another, so I could do an L with a T tangent and a T tangent, and then it's going to get us as close as we can. So if you have yourself a belt guard to make, X trim that and join. It's easy. Okay? So we looked at the snaps that have a lot to do with circles, and let's continue on and look at some more. So the next common snap that we would use would be a midpoint. So I'm going to tell it I want to draw a line, let's say, from the midpoint snap. Okay. Now, a circle doesn't have a midpoint, at least not one that is helpful to us. A line has a midpoint, so each of these lines has a midpoint, and so does the side of each square or rectangle. So I have a node here and a node here, but there is an implied midpoint that is halfway between. So if I use the midpoint snap and click on this square close to the middle, then it's going to, as you can see, snap to the middle. And then I'll show you I can midpoint snap, and I could come up here and just click on this line anywhere, and it jumps to the midpoint of that line. So you can see pretty easily how it is to use the midpoint snap. So let's go now to an on-path snap and a perpendicular snap. The on-path, perpendicular, and table edge kind of are all similar. The on-path snap just simply means if I click close to a path, please move my click over and put it on the path itself. Perpendicular snap will draw a perpendicular line, and table edge snap also does a perpendicular line, but to the table edge. So let me show you. Let's say that I want to draw a perpendicular line from this horizontal line up to this angled line. So I would push L for line, and then my first point would be P, perpendicular to this line. So I'll just click anywhere on this line. Okay, and it's like an on-path snap, except it's remembered that I want it perpendicular. Now let's just, for the sake of using some more snaps, let's say I want it from this end point of this line down here to this line. So I've done perpendicular from this, E for endpoint, and I'll click right here, and there we have a line straight down from the end point of this perpendicular to this line here. Now let's say that I wanted to have a line, L for line, and I'm going to do my perpendicular snap again, and this time I'm going to say from this line up here, and we'll just use either an H or an M, so we'll use an H. We haven't used that one. That's an on-path snap. So I want it to be on this path, and it's not real mathematical. I just write in here. So I click that. Now I've got an intersection. It actually does run down and connect because I said H on that path, and it's perpendicular to this line here. So that's a 90-degree angle down to this because we said perpendicular, and that's the first one we clicked. Same way with these, this was to a straight line, so same way here. If I did a line from P perpendicular, and then H on this path, now my line is perpendicular up here to this top one. So that's a little bit about those. Let's see what else we've got here. We have arc in snap. Maybe somebody smarter than me and has used that, but I've never used it. Torch point snap is R, and that's very handy if you are out on your table computer and you need to, let's say, trace something, rudimentary, like a four-pointed square. If you had, let's say I've got a confused shaped piece of metal, okay? So my piece of metal looks like this, okay? And I put it out on the table, and I set it down. So move your torch manually over on the table to this point, and then you can use your torch snap to draw a line from your torch snap. You would manually slowly move your torch up to the next spot, and we would push R for our torch point snap, and it would snap up to there. And you can do that with all your points until you have your shape drawn, because then you can drag your drawing over into it and cut it out. So hopefully that makes sense. I'll cover that snap more in depth when I take it out to the computer that's connected to the table and do a video from there for that. Then we have a table edge snap that's B. So I can draw a line, and I can do a B, and that's going to, you see where I clicked, so line B. It just jumped right down to it, perpendicular, and then I can draw it up to that node point. That's doing it from that direction. If I wanted to set this off square, I could do a line from the Q quadrant of this circle to B, table edge, and see that automatically drops it down there for me. Okay, so I could convert that to a cut path and cut my scrap off. So that'll jump you perpendicular down to the table edge. The other one we should talk about is spot snap. And so let's say I wanted to draw, let me see, let me move this over here and connect these. Otherwise it'd just be the center, and we could use the center. So let's say I measured this. Then it tells me the center of mass. I used F8. We'll cover that later. But that's what generates this red dot. Then I could do a line from an S spot snap, and wherever I click on the table, it's going to jump to the closest red spot there is. In this case, there's only one. So when I click out there, it jumps into there, to that spot. We didn't look at the intersection snap. It's pretty self-explanatory. Line, I intersection snap, and if I click on this square here, it jumps down to where that line intersects it. It jumps to the nearest intersection. So most of this I've done in drawing, but snaps do accurately work for moving and other editing pieces that you want to do. So I could move this square, and then it wants to know move from. Well, that's the point of reference. So if I wanted to move this center of this square, let's say, to this quadrant of this circle, then I would move from the C center and click on my square and see what happens. I'm dragging it from the center. Then I could Q quadrant snap, and it would put that dead center. So you can see they're used for move and several other tools. But there you have a snap overview of the temporary snaps. The running snaps that you can also turn on are grid and node and orthogonal. So orthogonal just means limited to 45s and 90s. So when I tell it an orthogonal snap, see what happens. Now I can't. Now I'm no longer free rotating. Now I'm stopping at 45 and 90 degrees. For grid, I'm going to zoom way in so you can see that, and I'm going to G snap first, and that's going to get me on that right on that point. If I G snap again, you can see now that I'm limited. I can move the quarter at a time. Every time I get past it, it jumps to there. So that's a half, 3/4, 1. And that's because I set that to a 1-inch grid with 4 snaps. So if I had 16, then we could jump 1/16 of an inch. But for design, for me, a 1/4 inch is good. So that's a 1/4 inch up, a 1/4 inch over. There's a 1/2 inch up and over. Here's 3/4 up and a 1/2 inch over. So you can use this in your design and drawing if it's helpful. If you find a spot you need it, you can use the grid snap. The other one is node point, which I showed you using in, but you can turn that on so all of your clicks go first to node point. And real quickly before I go, if you have a running snap locked on like orthogonal, and I decide that I want to move something without it being, so I would rotate from the end point and see I'm locked. But if I didn't want to be, then I could hit O and it would unlock it. So you can temporarily unlock those running snaps if you just hit the key that corresponds with that piece. So we'll dig into that a lot deeper later, but I just wanted to give you that info, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.